Welcome to the Why You're Wrong Fantasy Football Podcast. We're on episode 39. We are in NFL Week 7. The bye apocalypse, as a lot of people have proclaimed it. There are 6 teams on bye, a lot of them just studded with fantasy superstars that are not going to be in your lineups this week, and then the Jaguars on the side. And we've tried to do our best to prepare, but it's honestly impossible to prepare for a week like this with how many teams are on bye.
I'm glad that it's happening in 1 week, though, because I'd rather take the loss this week and not have to spread it out amongst the other weeks, because I'll take the loss this week, but after this, my guys better come ready to play.
And so for those of you who are at the bottom of your leagues and also facing by apocalypse, the thing is you have to remember is that we're only halfway through the fantasy calendar year at this point. We have 14 weeks. We're on week 7. You can go on a run the last 7 weeks. You just have to make it in at that last playoff spot. You don't have to be first or second. You just have to make sure you're making it into the last spot. So you could have a bad half the first start of the fantasy season, but squeeze in the playoffs at the end if you keep at it.
And if you're 1-5 right now, I mean, most likely you're not going to make the playoffs, but I've seen crazier things happen before. So best of luck.
So as our intro, I'm your monotone master. Across from me is Brian Tambo, the fantasy force here. We lost John Rumney. The Raging Rumney has had to leave the podcast due to being overworked, but you can find our podcast on Apple Podcast and on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts in general. And then you can find us on social media as Why You're Wrong on YouTube and Why You're Wrong FFB, TikTok and Instagram, and on Twitter as You're Wrong FFB. But we got to get into some week 6 headlines, and someone left the Chargers unplugged Saturday night because they just got smacked by the Ravens. I think they only scored 6 points, including, was it a failed 2-point conversion or missed PAT?
I don't even know what happened in that game. Like, the Chargers ended up, they beat the Chiefs.
Yep.
They beat, who else did they beat? Did they beat the Bills?
I can't remember. All I know is we projected this to be a great fantasy shootout, and it was just the most disappointing thing ever.
Like, Eckler had 6 carries for 7 yards. Like, what happened out there? I just don't even think they're prepared for that game. I mean, the Ravens defense, they did look really good, and the Ravens have been looking pretty good as of lately, but there's no reason that they should have done as bad as they did in that game.
And the surprising thing is they were down by so much so quickly that you didn't even get garbage time because they just took out all their starters halfway through the third quarter. Because Mike Williams got hurt, came back in, and then they just stopped using him. Mm-hmm. Eckler did nothing. And then it was just basically Jared Cook and scrubs the last quarter of the game.
Yeah, it was a fluke game. Let's go with that. Even in a good game for the Ravens too, if you have Lamar Jackson, which I do, I think every single backup running back on that offense scored a touchdown. I think Latavius Murray scored a touchdown. Yep. Le'Veon Bell scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
Devonta Freeman scored a touchdown. Latavius Murray's, I think he's banged up now. So who knows? Tyson Williams is probably going to go for like 3 touchdowns the next game. So that was the one thing that worried me. But it is good that the Ravens are looking pretty solid. And I think Lamar is definitely going to bounce back after what he did last week.
Yeah, it's crazy. The Ravens scored 34 points and Lamar only has 13 fantasy points. That's a coincidence. That's not going to be a common theme. No. But also, as we were talking before the podcast, Derrick Henry is proving all the historical stats wrong that suggested he would have a down year. Before the season, it was a running back with that many carries has never bounced back after a year like that. So everyone was like, oh, Derrick Henry doesn't catch the ball. He just had a massive workload. He probably won't do the same thing again this year. And the offensive line is terrible. The offensive in general is bad for the Titans. But here is Derrick Henry coming off a 5th straight game of 100 yards, a 2nd straight game of 3 touchdowns, and is on pace for 2,350 yards, which is an NFL record, and also on pace for 30 touchdowns, which is also another NFL record. And on top of that, he's been catching the ball this season. Like, what is going on in Tennessee, Brian?
I saw a stat that he's the first ever 245-pound man that has been clocked over 21 miles per hour on that 74-yard run. And no man that's 245 pounds should be able to run that fast. I mean, we've seen guys like Steven Jackson, Brandon Jacobs, like all these big guys in the past, but there is no one like Derrick Henry. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes down as the best running back of all time.
And it's
when his career is over.
He's built like a Clydesdale. Like when you watch him run, you're like, he's not moving that fast. And then just no one catches him. It just looks like he's moving in slow motion and no one else around him can touch him.
I almost feel like some of the linebackers just move out of the way, because when he gets full head of steam and you're one-on-one with him, it's either A, you go at his legs, or B, you just get out of the way, because there's a good chance that you're probably going to get hurt on that play.
The few times where like he would run into the defensive lineman and then push the defensive lineman over for a few yards, it's just like if he can run over the biggest guy on your defense, like how are you going to stop him?
I said it last year. He falls for 5 yards. He doesn't even have to run. He just gets the ball and he can fall for 5 yards. That's how good and efficient he is. But I was wrong about him. I mean, I heard all the reports. I listened to all the naysayer, and I thought he was going to have an off season because the Titans were going to have to play from behind. But the Titans could be down 30 and they're still going to run with him for 30 times a game. So if you got Derrick Henry, you're probably at the top of your leaderboard right now because he's a beast.
So it's like
for my
okay, go.
go
The
ahead.
thing is, I was just gonna add, it's like there's four players you could have taken before Derrick Henry if you weren't believing the script of him having another good year was Christian McCaffrey, which makes sense if you took him 101. No one's faulting you. No one's gonna fault you for taking Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara. And then the biggest thing is, I mean, I took Zeke because Zeke looked good in the preseason. He looked like he's going to have a great year. He's always involved in the passing game. So Zeke hasn't had a bad year, but in retrospect, if you took Zeke over Henry, you're feeling not so great, but you're not in the biggest hole as you would be if you had, let's say, CMC, who's missed the last 3 games.
Yeah, Zeke was kind of doubted too going into the drafts. I mean, if you took like someone like Nick Chubb over Zeke, you'd probably be pretty upset with yourself right now, because Zeke does look actually really, really good right now. And I thought that after the season, he wasn't even going to be like a top 5 or even a first round running back taken off the board, but he's definitely proven himself. And the Cowboys, from week 1 into where they are now, I mean, they passed the ball 50 times in the first game. And now it seems like they're going to this more run styled offense where you have Zeke, and then you have a man that has the most yards per carry, which is Tony Pollard, which is kind of crazy because he's still the backup. So
Yeah.
they got a good run. They got a good run team. I wouldn't be upset with Zeke, but clearly Derrick Henry is probably going to end up finishing as the RB1 this season. And I don't even think it's going to be even close. So it is what it is. But moving on, my week 6 reaction headlines are sad to say, but the Gibbs season is it's coming to an end. It's very slowly coming to an end. He's been dealing with this shin injury. I think they're saying that's a fracture within the shin. And then you also said something about that he has an injury in his calf as well. It's kind of sad because we thought coming into the season he was going to get that Christian McCaffrey type role that Ron Rivera was talking about at the beginning of the season. Clearly that hasn't been the case because J.D. McKissic has been taking up a lot of third down passing plays, a lot of 2-minute drills, even some goal line carries that have been robbed from Gibson in the duration of the past like 4 weeks. So it's been tough for Antonio Gibson. I do think he will bounce back if he does get healthy, but I'm expected for him to be out probably somewhere between 3 to 4 weeks. He did have an MRI. That news hasn't been broken yet. So hopefully something good comes out of the MRI, but if it doesn't, a lot of people are speculating that he's probably going to be out for a few weeks. So if you're an Antonio Gibson owner like me in 2 other leagues, get prepared to not have him and pick up someone like J.D. McKissic if he's still on the waiver wire, which I doubt it. But if he is, go get him right now because it's probably going to be the hottest waiver wire pickup for the week.
He's probably on waivers in 8-team leagues. If the 10-team league or above, he's probably already scooped up either by the Gibson manager or someone who's a Gibson hater.
Yeah, but then there's other people out. I mean, everyone. I feel like every starting running back except for maybe Zeke and Derrick Henry that were taken maybe in the first round or the second round has gotten hurt at some point. Also, I mean, Najee and Eckler are still there, but you have your Dalvin, Saquon, Nick Chubb, CMC. I mean, the list keeps going on. It's not a great year for running back. It wasn't even a great year for drafting running backs because the draft pool was so low. So it's just kind of an unfortunate situation for the season. But it is what it is. Hopefully Antonio Gibson can bounce back. My second point, the Ravens actually look really, really good. They lost a lot of people in the beginning of the season. They lost J.K. Dobbins. They lost Justice Hill. They lost Marcus Peters. Who else did they lose on defense? They lost someone else on defense. I'm not sure. Anyways, they lost a lot of key players on the team, and everyone thought that the Ravens weren't even going to be the top of the division. And they're going on to smoke teams like the Chargers. They're beating all these great teams right now. Lamar Jackson is actually looking like the MVP. And it looks like they're actually doing well with their 30-year-old running back core that they got, and they just keep them out. It's kind of crazy, but I mean, that defense is looking really, really good too. So I expect them to keep on moving in that division.
If you don't count on week 1, they're 5-0.
No, yeah. I mean, week 1 was still a close game too. I mean, Lamar Jackson is just looking unbelievable right now. Probably the most fun player to watch in the NFL. So I'm looking for big things for the Ravens. Probably won't end up in a Super Bowl because, I mean, the Bills look really good, except for last night.
Yeah.
The Chiefs will probably bounce back, and then clearly we have the Bucks and the Cardinals in the NFC, and the Rams. I'll give the Rams up there in a Super Bowl contending run. So there's a lot of good teams. It really just depends, what happens in the playoffs because, as we know, the Ravens tend to choke. My last point: the Patriots. As a Patriots fan, I have to say they're the best 2-4 team in the NFL. The amount of games that come down to the wire and how well Mac Jones is playing, on pace to be the most accurate rookie quarterback of all time, and we just can't get it done. Is it bad play calling? Is it Bill Belichick being too safe with Mac Jones when you have a 4th and 2 on the 50-yard line? You don't go for it and you punt it off to one of the best offenses in the league. Yeah, that's probably not the best play call, but I think once the Patriots start giving Mac Jones more of let the ball loose and just go crazy, I think the Patriots will actually start winning games. But from what we saw when they played the Bucks, they actually held Brady to 0 touchdowns. And then last week against the Cowboys, they should have ended up winning that game. Blown coverage on CeeDee Lamb in overtime. Should have went for it on 4th and 2. There's a lot of games besides those two that we should have won. And I mean, we got a nice warm one against the Jets. Should win 40-0, but you never really know with us because we'll probably lose by 1 point to the Jets. So that's just how it is.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch the Patriots as a non-Patriots fan, as you know, but Mac Jones has looked really good. Like he looks like he's definitely he's never going to be like a top potential does he become Justin Herbert? Maybe, but like it looks like he's a really solid rookie quarterback. Like he's not going to bust like Mitch Trubisky. He's not going to bust like Tua, but he just looks pretty solid. It just feels like the team around him is kind of failing. It's not him himself.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, you have Jonas Smith, you have Hunter Henry, Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar. None of those guys are like stellar names out there. So if you give someone like a good offense, like give them like the Bills offense with like Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, Stephon Diggs, like would Mac Jones actually probably be 4-2 right now? Probably. I just think that our lineup's just not good enough right now. The defense is pretty good, but the offense definitely needs some work. And that's kind of what we've been struggling with for years because, as you know, the Patriots don't pay for their players. We just kind of scheme our way around and try to win football games the right way. So I think things will turn around for the Patriots. But other than that, we do look very good. And we are one of the hardest 2-4 teams to beat in the league moving forward.
Name a Patriots offensive player that you could start in fantasy with full confidence.
With full confidence?
With full confidence.
Wow.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. No one except maybe Damian Harris, maybe. And that's not even confident. I mean, you could start Damian Harris in like a flex, like desperation, like your team lost everyone in injuries. Like, all right, I feel kind of confident. He's still a starting running back. He gets his carries. He'll probably score a touchdown. But the way that Stevenson just played last week, because we're losing Brandon Bolden, we lost a couple other guys. Damian Harris is dealing with an injury. It's like, you never really know with the Patriots. I mean,
who has a better week, Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson versus the Jets?
I'm gonna say Stevenson. Honestly, I think Stevenson goes for like 2-3 touchdowns. I think he's like that, like Garrett Blunt for the Patriots. He's just that bruiser that's just gonna take these goal line carries away from Damian Harris. I could see it happen, but honestly, I think either of them score.
I've got a really hard tilt question for you when we get to our pickups for the week, but just moving on quickly to our Devil's Advocate team this year. This week, Tua got back into the lineup, and even though watching Tua was hilarious, he still ended up with 22 fantasy points, which is just so frustrating to watch because we both dislike him. We're looking at this team: Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, Jonathan Taylor, who has shoved it in our face the past 2 weeks, Miles Sanders, because Dallas Goedert was on the COVID list. I threw Zach Ertz at that tight end spot, and then Melvin Gordon was our flex play for this team. And they finished with 93.3, and we both took L's to this team. I just lost at 92, and unfortunately, you were down at 85. So I'm 4-2 on the year. You're 3-3 on the year against this team.
I'll make a comeback. I mean, we were wrong about Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about Jonathan Taylor. I did so much. I mean, he is good. Jonathan Taylor is good. I didn't think he was worthy of a first-round draft pick. Clearly, Marlon Mack's about to get traded. They don't use Nyheim Hines as much. And a lot of Jonathan Taylor's production has come from giant plays. Like I think last week he had an 87-yard run. The week before that he had a screen pass that was also for like 87 yards, or maybe that was last week, or maybe that was this week. And then he had another run last week, which was also for like 83, 84 yards. So a lot of his production is coming from big plays. But as a fantasy owner, like you kind of have to love them at this point because they do actually have the easiest remaining schedule left for running backs. So if you have Jonathan Taylor, congrats. I still don't like him. However, if you have him, good for you.
Because even if you take away those two big plays, he's still finishing with 15, 16 points with the still RB1 numbers.
Yeah, I mean he's good. He's got talent. I just didn't think before the start of the season that he would get all these carries, all this work, but it seems like the Colts realize that he's this good. Marlon Mack again is not going to be there, and Nyheim Hines isn't really a part of this offense that much.
It could also just be they also don't have the most intimidating passing game, so Jonathan Taylor is their most talented offensive player that they have to give the ball to.
Yeah, I mean Michael Pittman is actually looking pretty good for them. Zach Pascal is looking good. Ty came back for one game. I thought he was torching Houston. I say it every time. When Ty plays the Texans, he torches them. He did get hurt though, which is sad. But if he didn't get hurt, I guarantee he would have ended that game 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Because whatever reason it is, T.Y. Hilton is the best fantasy start ever when he plays the Houston Texans.
It's just absurd. But getting into some injury news. So Chris Carson was placed on IR. So Alex Collins came in, had a really solid game as an RB2 filling in, but he exited late in the fourth quarter with a glute injury. So he's questionable for Monday Night Football. Rashad Penny is coming back off of IR. So if Alex Collins can't go, Rashad Penny might be getting the start. Then you also have to factor in DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. They also play the Saints on Monday night, which is a very good defense. Dawson Knox broke a bone in his hand. He has a bye week, so he has some time to rest up. Don't know how severe that broken bone will be. Dak Prescott suffered a calf injury on his winning touchdown play against the Patriots. Has a bye week to rest up, though. Kadarius Toney was really upsetting because I played him confidently in my flex in a PPR league, and he got off to a fantastic start. 3 catches, 36 yards, and re-aggravated his ankle injury on the opening drive. And he was out for the rest of the game, to be determined if he's going to be in the game this week versus Carolina. CMC was placed on IR, so for all those people hoping that CMC would be back after a limited practice the previous week, he's going to miss another 2 games at the minimum. Kareem Hunt was carted off, placed on IR. Baker Mayfield re-aggravated his shoulder injury, and Taylor Lewan and Julio Jones were both injured in the Titans game, which is 2 negative factors going against Tannehill in that Titans offense.
Julio getting injured? I've never heard of it. Is that a shock to people or what? I'm kidding.
No. It was just like it looked like he just didn't do he caught the ball for 5 yards and then just ran off to the sideline and just never came back in. And then it was after the game, it's he injured his hamstring again.
See, after how Tannehill played, because I don't have Justin Herbert this week in some of my leagues. I also have, who's my other quarterback? Yeah, no, Justin Herbert in my league. I'm looking for free agents to pick up, and I was thinking of free agent quarterbacks that I could actually pick up. And Tannehill came on my mind because I was oh, he's having a great game. But with no Julio, I'm starting to doubt myself. I'm all right, he had one good game. Will Tannehill end up doing it again? Probably not. So I'm probably going to fade him this week because Julio is a pretty big playmaker. He's been playing pretty well with AJ Brown out with injury, but now that he has this hamstring injury, it's kind of a limited offense. Probably 40 carries for Derrick Henry is my guess this week.
We'll talk about him in waivers because right now he's my quarterback pickup of the week, so we can discuss that a little bit further.
Got you.
But some defensive injuries. The Titans lose Caleb Farley, their rookie cornerback, and also just suffered a ton of injuries in the secondary. It just got to the point where they only had 3 corners left, which basically the Bills are we're going to totally abuse that by just throwing constantly to all their wide receivers all game. Buccaneers, Richard Sherman sidelined with a hamstring injury for a few weeks. So that's another team that just doesn't have anyone in the secondary to play defense. And then the Vikings, Patrick Peterson has also been placed on IR with a hamstring injury. So that's those are 3 defenses that have been killed through the air that just all got worse even more.
Yeah, the Bucs defense is kind of the only thing that might hold them back from a Super Bowl run, but their offense is just so good right now. I don't see that being a factor. And then the Vikings too. Kirk Cousins is looking like a true QB1 out there. So I mean, I don't think Patrick Peterson is the same Patrick Peterson that we thought he was back in the Cardinals. It is sad that he had an hamstring injury, but I don't know. The Vikings are looking pretty good right now, and Dalvin looked good. Justin Jefferson's looking good. Adam Thielen's looking good. So I got high hopes for the Vikings moving forward. I think they can make a pretty big push into the playoffs.
Now to move on to just studs, I'm just going to list off our first half. So at quarterback, Dak Prescott's up here again, 27.8. Kirk Cousins, 28.5 against the Panthers defense. Overtime did help. Adam Thielen having a day did help. Josh Allen, 29.7. At running back, the Buccaneers forgot about Ronald Jones and Giovanni Bernard. And Leonard Fournette finished 81-2, also 6 for 46 through the air for 27.7. Jonathan Taylor up here again with 145-2, then caught 2 passes for 13 yards, 28 points. And then Derrick Henry, 143-3, just crushing the souls of anyone he plays against, 34.6. Then wide receiver Adam Thielen. Now this did me in a few leagues. 11 for 126-1, 24.3.5 PPR. Cooper Kupp doing his usual thing, 9 for 130-2 for 29.5. And CeeDee Lamb just absorbing all of the big Dallas plays, 9 for 146-2 for 31.6 points.
Our boy, CeeDee Lamb. You love to see the breakout game from him. That's just huge right there. I mean, and also Leonard Fournette too. Leonard Fournette is sneakily becoming a very good RB2 play in most leagues. I saw someone trade Leonard Fournette for Henry Ruggs 3 weeks ago. And it has worked out in their favor very, very well since.
It's like that's the thing in hindsight. Like 3 weeks ago, Leonard Fournette was like, great, he's sharing carries again. They brought in Gio, he's not going to be great, and here we are, and he just got everything this week.
He's catching balls, he's running back. I mean, Ronald Jones is kind of irrelevant at this point. So if you can get Leonard Fournette in your lineup, especially with how low the RBs are, it's probably going to work out pretty well in your favor. But moving on to studs for the tight ends. Both my actually all 3 of the studs on here are all in my fantasy lineups, except Mike Gesicki, who's on my bench. But anyways, Mark Andrews had 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. He had 15.3 points. Mike Gesicki looking good with Tua. I don't like Tua, but he does love Mike Gesicki, so I gotta like him a little bit. He had 8 catches for 115. He had 15.5. And then Noah Fant had a huge day with 9 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown for 20.2 points. It is surprising to not see Travis Kelce up here. I mean, Travis Kelce has definitely struggled recently as Patrick Mahomes continues to throw pick after pick after pick. Most of them aren't his fault. I think Tyreek Hill has probably dropped 3 balls through his hands that have resulted in Patrick Mahomes picks. But I'm sure we'll probably see Travis Kelce up in this studs leaderboard as the week goes on. And then for kickers, we had Tyler Bass with 13, Matt Prater with 15, and then Matthew Wright at the very top with 16. And then for defenses, we have the Cowboys at 13, the Colts at 15, and the Rams at 16. I think they all scored defensive touchdowns in this game. We all know that the Cowboys and Trevon Diggs, probably going to be Defensive Player of the Year, scored a touchdown for the Patriots. And then the very next play, Kendrick Bourne burned him for an 84-yard touchdown. So that was fun to see. But right now, Trevon Diggs, if we're going to talk a little bit about defense, he's looking good. He's got more touchdowns. Or no, he's got the same amount of touchdowns as his brother Diggs on the Buffalo Bills. That's Stephon Diggs, which is crazy to think about.
I just want to mention some of the tight ends for a second. So Mike Gesicki, 8 for 115. Also, you have to remember that Devontae Parker is out, Preston Williams is out, and Will Fuller is out. We're the 3 leading targets for the Dolphins. So that means it's just Gesicki and Waddle who just balled out in London this weekend. Noah Fant and Cortland Sutton have just been the only people that Teddy Bridgewater can see. I think Jared Judy's going to come back and most likely eat into what Noah Fant's been getting the past few weeks. Jerry Jeudy is a question mark for Thursday. If the game was on Sunday, Jeudy would probably be playing, but because it's so early in the week, Judy's probably out with just one more week.
Yeah, I think he's out for this week. I think they already said that they weren't going to end up playing him. They said 50-50, but right now it's not looking possible just because they play on Thursday. But I guarantee for next Sunday, Jeudy will be back, and it's going to be like, all right, who's going to lose share? Is it going to be Cortland Sutton or is it going to be Noah Fant? It's kind of going to be a toss-up at that point.
Right. Now getting into some duds. I know these are the ones that it's a little bit harder to talk about because they hurt you. And we can kind of also just decide if this is something to be worried about or not. So Austin Eckler, 7.5 points. Not worried about that. Miles Sanders, 7.6. You can blame Miles Sanders' terrible season to Jalen Hurts stealing every single goal line red zone touchdown from him. Miles Gaskins, 2.4. Like what's up with the gas man, Brian?
I traded him away for the sole reason because I didn't believe in him. He had one good week, shipped him off, got Calvin Ridley. I'm loving it.
That is, oh, poor Andrew right now.
Poor Andrew.
Antonio Gibson, he did. But Antonio Gibson, we were talking before the podcast, 3.4. Not fun. Gibson is hurt. It's not fun to have your champion be injured like this. It just feels like the world is against him right now. It's not his fault. It's just you can't stop yourself from getting injured. It's just part of the game. Chase Edmonds, 6.5, which was really frustrating because we saw a similar player in Austin Eckler get 30 last week versus the Browns. Very disappointing to see Chase Edmonds get 6.5 and James Conner finished with a better day than him.
I would start to get worried. Everyone's hyping up Chase Edmonds, saying that he's going to take the lead back. I mean, I have this later in the podcast, but James Conner got 16 carries, so just beware. I'll talk about it later.
Yeah, and then Brandon Bolden. And we unfortunately saw a member of another league have to be forced into playing Brandon Bolden, who finished with 0.7 points in your lineup, which is, I understand going for the receiving option on the Patriots, but that hurts, getting less than a point from a player.
Ramondre Stevenson is going to take over that Brandon Bolden role. Brandon Bolden's going right back to special teams. Don't believe in the Yahoo projections of him being like 7 to 8 points for the week. It's most likely going to drop down to like 2 or 3 points for this week.
And then at wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, 4.8 points on 8 targets. Not super worried. It's just the run that Taylor Heineke was on has now ended. He's just very clear to be just a backup quarterback. Mike Williams, 3.7, which is really sad. It was just like game script and also getting hurt early in the game. Tyler Lockett, 4.5 points with Geno Smith. I think we all saw this bad game coming for Lockett. He did have 7 targets from Geno, but Geno's really just going to look for DK Metcalf for those big plays. Tyler Lockett is really just when Geno scrambles, it can't find anyone else. Marquise Brown, 5.5 with this weird game from Lamar and the return of Rashad Bateman. So it's just like one of those things going forward. Marquise Brown was off to this hot start. Do you think this is just a blip on the radar and he gets back to what he's been doing? Or do you think Rashad Bateman is going to come in and take a decent amount of work from him?
I think it's a fluke game for Marquise Brown. I think that Lamar didn't have a great game, but they did win by big solely because the running backs took a lot of the touchdowns. But Lamar does look for Marquise Brown on those big plays, like down the field. So I expect Marquise Brown to honestly bounce back. I had big hopes from the end of last season, and he's been off to a really hot start. So I think it was just the game script and how everything played out and how the running backs were doing really well. So I wouldn't be too worried. I'd play him again next week, and he'll probably end up going off.
We also saw Mike Evans, 3.7, and it's just the pattern that not every Buccaneers receiver is going to have a good game because there's too much to go around. Chase Claypool, 2.7, got injured and tried to play through it. Chris Godwin, 6.8 points, just the same thing as the Mike Evans story. Kadarius Toney only got 5.1. Over at quarterback, Taylor Heineke, 10.2, which is really just not what we were hoping for, hoping that he'd be forced to be mobile, forced to make plays going against the Chiefs. That did not happen. Lamar Jackson, as we talked about, 13.3. And Ryan Tannehill, 13.9, which included a rushing touchdown. It's just everyone who drafted Ryan Tannehill, including myself in some leagues, expecting him to have a similar kind of season as he did last year, whereas good offense, but bad defense means the quarterback has to be good for fantasy, has not come to fruition yet once this year.
No, we had the debate on who that back end QB was going to be for QB1 this year, and it was between Tannehill, Stafford, and Jalen Hurts. And right now, it's looking like Jalen fourth quarter Hurts is taking the lead right now because Ryan Tannehill is just all over the place.
You mean 2021 Tim Tebow?
2021 Tim Tebow.
Matt Stafford has had a good season so far. I think he's like the quarterback 8 or 7 on the year, which is not bad. At tight end, Dawson Knox, 6 points, got that 2-point conversion. Cameron Brate, 4.1, and then Tyler Higbee at 6.1. Can you still hear me, Brian?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, my headphones just died. All
right.
Can you hear me? I can still hear you, so I think it's just probably I'm going through computer audio now. All right, flex pickups. Let's see. I will lead unless you had any comments on the duds before we move on?
No duds. I mean, they were just very upsetting. I scored 70 points in one of my leagues. I scored 130 in my other league. It happens. It's fantasy football, but we move on, and hopefully that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. All right. So going into wide receivers, I've got Christian Kirk versus Houston, who it's just really, this is a deep threat target. This is just the guy you're throwing in, hoping he gets a touchdown out of the multiple touchdowns that Kyler Murray might throw on a weekly basis. And also Hunter Renfrow versus the Eagles, because even though Henry Ruggs is slowly starting to have a better year, Hunter Renfrow is Derek Carr's favorite third down target.
Hunter Renfrow is looking actually really good on the Raiders offense with Darren Waller kind of struggling right now. Hunter Renfrow is that waiver wire pickup guy that can get you consistently like 8 to 12 points. And I would definitely highly recommend picking him up because he's been pretty consistent so far. For my pickups, I chose the other guy on the side of the ball for your Christian Kirk pick, and I chose AJ Green. I think regardless, I think the Cardinals probably put up 50 on Houston, and DeAndre gets a touchdown, AJ Green gets a touchdown, Christian Kirk gets a touchdown, Rondell Moore gets a touchdown.
Everyone gets a touchdown?
James Conner gets a touchdown. Kyler gets a rushing touchdown. Chase Edmonds gets they might score 8 touchdowns in this entire game. I'm not kidding. Houston is that bad at football. I mean, offensively, you could say something how, Mills isn't looking too bad, but that defense is just atrocious. So expect a lot of points from this team, and AJ Green has been a stud so far for the Cardinals. And then my other pick is a guy coming back in Devontae Parker. Don't love the pick, but we're choosing guys that are on the waiver wire right now. He is playing Atlanta. A lot of guys are hurt. Will Fuller's still hurt. Tua is back in the lineup, so it does give you a little bit more trust in him. I don't think Mike Gesicki's getting 8 targets a game, so he's going to have to throw the ball to someone, whether it's Waddle, Gesicki. I expect Parker to at least do something in this game. Again, don't love it, but just for the matchup, you can put him in your lineup if you're really struggling.
And then at running back, we've got Dearness Johnson versus the Broncos. So it's one of those things where Baker Mayfield is injured, but Nick Chubb is out for this. He's been ruled out. Kareem Hunt's on IR. So with the way this team likes to operate through the ground game, Dearness Johnson looks like a big pickup. And if he's out, like if you don't have the first waiver priority or you don't have a lot of fab, if for some reason J.D. McKissic is still sitting on the waiver wire, with Gibson's injury, you have to take J.D. McKissic versus the Packers.
I mean, you have to pick up J.D. McKissic because, again, we are expecting that Gibson's going to be out for a couple weeks at this point. We're hoping it isn't. I hope the MRI comes back. I haven't even looked at the news today. I'm hoping I look back at his player card and something good came out of it. But from all the initial reports, it doesn't seem promising. So go get J.D. McKissic if he's still in free agents. For my pickups, probably already on someone's team, might not be, but Kenyon Drake, the highest paid backup running back in the entire league, is playing Philadelphia this week. He actually played pretty well last week. He scored a touchdown. He got a couple more, he got a couple catches in the game. He got a couple more rushes as he did in the week prior. This is a really tough week to have a running back. So if you have Kenyon Drake or if he's on your free agents, go pick him up because he could do anything against the Eagles with how bad they've been playing recently. And then my last one is Gio Bernard. I don't love it. Again, the free agents are so slim at this
super
point.
thin for running back.
There is just no one out there. You can pick up like Ty Johnson. Like, I don't want anything to do with that. So I'm expecting that the Bears are just awful. The Bucks go up big. They pull out Leonard Fournette. Gio Bernard comes in, catches like a screen pass for like a 50-yard touchdown. It's more just like a Hail Mary play at this point, but that's my second flex pickup for the week.
I feel like Gio's most likely spot to score is when it's like 3rd and goal and on like the 6-yard line. So they can't just run it up the middle. And it's just a little up and in plays. And he just catches a quick touchdown.
Yeah. I mean, Gio was also hurt. I think he's fully healthy now. So I'd expect for him to at least get a few passing downs. But then again, it all comes down to how badly the Bucks can beat them. And if they can get up big enough, then Gio can come in for that garbage time. That's kind of my hope and Hail Mary for the week.
Yeah, Kenyon Drake just really just did me in. Like, you got Josh Jacobs, you got Payne Barber, you got Kenyon Drake, and Kenyon Drake walks away with 21 fantasy points in a full PPR. And I have Darren Waller. So I'm sitting here like, why aren't you throwing these touchdowns to Darren Waller? Why is Kenyon Drake getting 2 touchdowns a game and he's not even the number 1 running back on his team? Like, Raiders, what are you doing? Like, well,
I think Darren Waller is probably the biggest buy low candidate in the entire league. I still have not lost faith in Darren Waller. He's still one of the top 3 tight ends in the league, even though he's playing down right now. I'd expect for him in the next few weeks to turn it back up because, again, the man's got all the talent in the world. Week 1, we saw what he's capable of. Just in the past, it hasn't been working in his favor. But I expect if you can trade for Darren Waller, I'd highly recommend it.
And since I've got Darren Waller in 3 leagues, we can touch on that. I've got him in the end section for some debate topics. All right, moving on. So some streamers you could be picking up. So as I said, Ryan Tannehill versus KC. Now the mindset is that, okay, KC is going to score a lot of points on this really bad Titans defense. Maybe they get up by so much that, okay, maybe they don't give it to Derrick Henry 30 times a game. So Ryan Tannehill is going to have to pass the ball, and we've seen him do it before. I mean, the offense has not been great, but he at least has AJ Brown coming into this week. It's not like the past few weeks where they haven't had either AJ Brown or Julio. And he's going to have to get it done through the air or doing play action or bootleg or something creative on the offensive scheme to stay competitive with KC. My other pick is Sam Darnold versus the Giants. Now, Sam Darnold has been disappointing the past 2 weeks, but he gets to play the Giants, who just aren't intimidating at all on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you took 2 of the guys that I probably would have taken as well. I think those are both pretty good starts if you have like Josh Allen or Justin Herbert on bye for this week. I did choose Winston on Monday Night Football against Seattle over the pickup of Ryan Tannehill versus the Chiefs. So when we talk next week, and if Winston has a worse day than Ryan Tannehill, I'm gonna be a little upset solely because 1, they're running the ball way too much with Derrick Henry right now, and 2, the Julio Jones hamstring injury is kind of concerning to me. I wish the best for Ryan Tannehill. I just don't see it. I don't trust them this season. I think that the Chiefs probably win this game outright by like 30 points. So we'll see what happens. But if you are desperate, those are 2 guys that you should probably pick up.
I do like Jameis Winston. It's also just kind of upsetting that Michael Thomas is still not back yet when you thought you'd have him back this week when people originally drafted him 7 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, if the Seahawks defense wasn't so bad, I would choose differently, but the Seahawks defense is just atrocious. So I expect Jameis Winston to probably air one out to Marquez Callaway, or he might hit Alvin Kamara on a screen pass for like a 70-yard touchdown. We haven't seen that from Alvin Kamara this season, and he usually does it on big games, aka 6 touchdowns on Christmas. Everyone remembers that game. So I expect that duo to do really well. I think the Saints end up beating the Seahawks. Sorry, Berkey, but probably will.
I've accepted how bad this. I was honestly shocked that we got into overtime on Sunday night versus Steelers.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, look, we maybe have a shot. And then it's like, oh, no, Geno Smith.
Geno Smith with the fumble against TJ Watt. TJ Watt gets paid all that money for a reason. So he did the best he could. He really could have won that game, but you shouldn't be too upset with how the Seahawks played, even though Pittsburgh is just god awful, other than Najee Harris, who is the best running back in the league.
Yeah.
I guess we'll move on to tight ends. You wanna kick us off?
Sure. So my pick for tight end is Ricky Seals-Jones, just on the same basis of J.D. McKissick. He's going to need a safety blanket. Logan Thomas is still out. Ricky Seals-Jones has taken over that role into a somewhat of a degree, where he's getting 5 to 6 targets a game, and he's caught a few touchdowns. So if you're just taking a shot in the dark this week because of how many guys are on bye, Ricky Seals-Jones could be that shot in the dark for you.
Yeah, no, that's a good pickup for the week as well, and I agree with that. Probably would have been my pickup as well, but my pickup is David Njoku. David Njoku had a pretty bad week. I think he had 1.6 points last week. It wasn't very good for the entire Browns offense, but the week before that, he had 20 plus fantasy points. I know that the Denver Broncos are one of the toughest teams against tight ends. However, with no Nick Chubb, with no Kareem Hunt, I don't think Jarvis Landry is coming back this week for Thursday Night Football. If you need a tight end, if you're in desperate need, David Njoku could provide that big play value, considering how low they are on offense right now.
Are you concerned at all if Baker Mayfield is still super injured at all?
I am a little concerned. I think the Browns are not as good as people think they are, and I'm not just saying that because they're losing a lot of injuries right now. But I never thought Baker was a top 12 quarterback. Some people thought he was. Even if he's fully healthy, I never truly believed in him. However, in a game where it's going to be back and forth a lot, I could see Njoku probably scoring here, or it could be Austin Hooper too. So I guarantee one of the two tight ends will score in this game because Baker is going to have to step up if they want to end up winning this game.
Right. For defense, also defense is super thin because there's not a lot of easy matchups to be streaming this week. A lot of the better defenses already been taken, and then the bad defenses are playing good offenses. So it's kind of a bad situation. Like, would you rather play Atlanta's defense versus Miami or Miami's defense versus Atlanta?
That's a tough one. Probably Miami's defense against Atlanta because Atlanta's defense is really, really bad. Miami's defense is bad too, but it's a little bit better than Atlanta.
But how much? Miami's defense is the 32nd best defense on third down this year.
Yeah, I think Miami ends up winning the game. So I'm solely going off who wins the game at this point.
So my pickup is the Saints versus the Seahawks if they're out there. They shouldn't be because if people saw how Geno Smith played the past 2 weeks, the Saints should already be rostered, but maybe they fell through because of a bye week or free agency. So if they're out there, look for them.
And then my pick is Vegas versus the Eagles. You better hope that the first 3 quarters of this game will be very good for the Vegas defense. But in the fourth quarter, you're going to have to witness Tim Tebow, aka Jalen Hurts, ruin your day because he's going to score 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. But you better hope for a pick six because it's probably going to come at some point.
So moving on to just a last few guys for debate. This is we're basically halfway through the season, as I mentioned already. And Darren Waller, he's the tight end 8 on the year, which is not what you were very thrilled with if you drafted him here. Well, I think he's the tight end 8 if you don't count week 1, tight end 4 if you still count week 1. So since week 1's explosion, he's really only averaging 4.5 catches a game for 45 yards each game, which is not terrible for a tight end. But if you took him in a draft, it's not what you were expecting. And it's really just there's been other emergences of Raiders' offensive weapons, but a lot of it has to just do with Derek Carr struggling. In the past few games, Darren Waller still gets 7 to 8 targets a game. It's just they just haven't been able to connect on those big plays. He had another touchdown sail over his head, unfortunately. It's just been frustrating as a Darren Waller owner.
It seems like the Raiders continue to put up a lot of points a game, yet Darren Waller is not scoring touchdowns or not catching passes. And that's honestly probably because of Derek Carr is just not feeding him the right passes. He's also probably getting double and triple covered because they don't believe in guys like Bryan Edwards, Hunter Renfrow, Henry Ruggs, and with the run game between Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs. There's a lot of key players that you could start from the Raiders in your fantasy lineup. I just think a lot of pressure is being put on Darren Waller, but as the weeks go on, I hope that he gets better because he is just an elite talent at tight end.
It's like one of those things like if once the defense finally has to respect the deep ball threat from Henry Ruggs, they probably stop having that extra safety hover over Darren Waller. So then it'll be a little bit more even and dispersed.
Exactly.
Okay, but in this example, let's say you had to trade Darren Waller, even though you don't want to. Let's say you've got what tight end would be on the table that you trade him with another piece for?
Probably TJ Hawkinson. I mean, I don't know if anyone wants TJ Hawkinson right now, but he actually did have he had a bounce back week. I like TJ Hawkinson. I don't think that he's going to be as good as people thought he was. But if there's someone who had a pretty good week and who's been consistently getting like 5 to 12 points, I'd probably throw TJ Hawkinson and maybe like another wide receiver or a running back and try to finesse Darren Waller right now while you can buy low with how bad he's been recently.
It's just like one of those things like it's coming, but like it needs to show up. Because if you're the Dan Waller manager, with the pieces you probably sacrificed to take that tight end talent, you probably haven't done as well. So it's just one of those you just really have to do a gut check to see if you can stay with it or not. Allen Robinson had his best game so far, went 4 for 53 through the air, which is like hats off to you for dealing with bad quarterbacks, Allen Robinson. But how confident are you in playing him this week versus Tampa Bay with all the fantasy guys out right now?
I mean, he's better than some other options out there for sure. And with Tampa Bay so short at cornerback, with Richard Sherman going out, I can't even name a starting cornerback on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's how bad it is. So it's probably not the best start considering that Allen Robinson hasn't showed up in the past few weeks. But in a game that should be a shootout, should be a lot of garbage time points from Justin Fields and the Bears. As long as Darnell Mooney doesn't steal the spotlight, I expect Allen Robinson probably to get a touchdown this week.
I mean, I would really love that because I am forced to play him right now in one league. Speaking of our Tim Tebow, Jalen Hurts has been crowned 2021 Tim Tebow. He's been winning fantasy games, but not NFL games. I think this is a 1-year stint for Jalen Hurts because I think the NFL is seeing that he's not the guy, but he's good enough to win games on his legs. And this is like one of those situations where would you trade Jalen Hurts if you're in a redraft league and you only have the rest of the year, or would you keep riding out this basically fourth quarter magic week to week?
I think for now you ride it out because I think that even with how bad Jalen Hurts is right now, he's still putting up 20 points. Just imagine what he can do when he actually has a good game. We're talking 30 to 35 fantasy points. And that's what we saw at the end of last season too. He was putting up 30 to 35 points because he was playing really well. Now he's getting 20 points in the fourth quarter. It's almost like if he has a good consistent 3 quarters, he's going to be a solid fantasy quarterback. The flip side is that do the Eagles still trust him to be their starting quarterback, considering how bad he's been? That's kind of the risk you're taking. It's like, do you think that they're going to end up benching him throughout the season because he is just terrible throughout the first 3 quarters?
I would say probably not, just because it's not like, what are you going to do? Go to Joe Flacco?
I mean, I've heard rumors that they're not loving the production that he's given right now for fantasy. Sure, he's giving great production, but from a team perspective, I mean, he doesn't really look like that great of a quarterback, and he's been making some pretty terrible throws, honestly. So,
also, we'll go to your first guy, James Conner. So let's talk about James Conner, Bryan, because we talked about him before the season started, and you were down and out on him, but now it looks like you've kind of changed your mind.
Yeah, I've definitely changed my mind. James, I mean, Chase Edmonds is just, he was supposed to be the guy. He's supposed to be, Kenyon Drake left. Chase Edmonds comes in, supposed to get 16 carries, supposed to get 8 catches a game, the next Christian McCaffrey. And then James Conner comes strolling through Arizona. They have a high-powered offense. They got DeAndre, they got to cover, Rondell Moore, Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Kyler Murray's legs. It's like, this is a perfect place for James Conner to kind of bring his career back into full form because he was on the Steelers. He had a terrible offensive line there at the end of his run there, which forced him to get traded. But now he's getting 16 to 15 carries a game. He's scoring a lot of touchdowns. I do think he is touchdown dependent a little bit, and I don't expect him to get 15 to 16 carries a game. However, if you are weak at running back right now, I think that James Conner is arguably a low-end RB2, a high-end RB3 right now, just from the sole production that we've seen in the last few weeks.
I mean, like, what's crazy to think is that Chase Edmonds, besides for this week and the previous week, has still been good for fantasy. He was still in the teens, putting up RB2 numbers. I mean, like this past week, he had like, I think, a 40-yard rush. The previous week, he had a 50-yard rush. And like that just happened to be it. Like, so at this point for Chase Edmonds, he's the receiving game for the running backs. So you're just hoping for big plays between the 20s for Chase Edmonds at this point until they show us something differently.
And Kenyon Drake, also to note, he was not as bad as people thought he was. He wasn't the superstar that we thought he was going to be. However, he did score like 10 touchdowns and ran for over 1,000 yards. And I think that the Cardinals like that style of offense where they use Chase Edmonds as that third down back, that passing down back. And then they have a flip side for someone who can actually run the ball like James Conner. So I think James Conner is filling in that Kenyon Drake role. He might not be as good as Kenyon Drake, even though he's actually scoring a lot of touchdowns. He's consistently putting up over 10 fantasy points a game. So if you have James Conner, I'd honestly start him with kind of confidence at this point. I mean, they have a really easy matchup against Houston, probably going to end up scoring another touchdown here. So if you can go out and get James Conner or even Chase Edmonds, I mean, I think both those running backs are going to be pretty good for the rest of the season.
I also want to talk about Amari Cooper because you have him here. So let's talk about Cooper because I've got some Cooper stock and it's not feeling – it's weird. Like he hasn't been bad for fantasy, but compared to week 1 and then also compared to what CeeDee Lamb has been doing recently, it doesn't feel great in the Amari Cooper world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason behind that, I didn't feel great drafting Amari Cooper in the first place. I got him for a good ADP when I did draft him, but the reason why it's just so tough to be an Amari Cooper owner is because you never know when the Cowboys are going to run the ball 50 times a game or if they're going to pass the ball 50 times a game. And with the emergence of Dalton Schultz, who just took the shine light of the Blake Jarwin era that we wish it was, he's stepping into that role right now because Dak Prescott absolutely loves Dalton Schultz. And CD Lamb just had a big game too. So it's really tough to determine, if Amari Cooper is going to have a bust week or if he's going to have a really high week. It's kind of a flip flop week after week, but as of right now, he's pretty boomer bust, and it's kind of sad to say that because he's such a good talent. But the Cowboys just don't really care about fantasy football; they only care about winning football games. So that's my take on Amari Cooper. I think he is still solid as a fantasy receiver, but he will have games where he has like 2-3 points, which is what you have to kind of live with.
And then Robert Woods found the end zone again, didn't he? But it's just he's just in comparison to Cooper Kupp, it just doesn't feel great being a Robert Woods owner.
No, I mean Cooper Kupp is clearly the wide receiver one in that offense, but it does feel good that Robert Woods, all he had to do was cry to Sean McVay, and then the week after that he had a career day and went absolutely off. Last week he caught a touchdown, still had a pretty good week. So I think moving forward, I think Sean McVay's like, all right, let's get Van Jefferson out of here. Let's get Deshaun Jackson out of here. Let's go back to Bobby Trees and let's start getting him more targets because
he's a good wide receiver. Like it doesn't.
He's
make
a good
sense.
wide receiver. He got 100 catches last year. Like he's been a stud in this offense before with Jared Goff. What can he do with Matt Stafford? They just didn't really get on the same page to start. And Matt Stafford loved Cooper Kupp, but I think as the season moves on, a lot of pressure is going to start be putting on Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods is going to start sliding back into that wide receiver 2 numbers that we expected he would be at the beginning of the season.
Okay, if you couldn't draft Derrick Henry, who is the one guy you wish you could have had at this point on the spot?
If I couldn't draft Derrick Henry?
Yeah. Who would you take?
One guy?
The one guy you'd really want this year.
Wow. I mean, probably Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I think it's.
I think Cooper Kupp's probably the guy that I missed out on, and I could have taken. I did miss out on T.J. Hawkinson, but I'm not too upset anymore because he hasn't been playing that well. But Cooper Kupp's definitely that guy because I knew Cooper Kupp was going to be good, and I wanted to draft him in one of my leagues, but I couldn't get him in any league, and here he goes for breaking records for a receiver right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think right now, so some of the best, it's like Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Mike Williams are all those guys who it's just like anyone could have easily drafted them, and you're just feeling so frustrated for not have drafting them because you thought the guy around them was going to be slightly better of a season, and then it's just they've rubbed it in our faces since.
Yes, it's sad, but that's the life of fantasy football. You just gotta suck it up, and hopefully next year you get the right choice.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode. We no longer do the clown of the week because honestly, John's not here, so he can't lead that charge. And it's hard to give someone a hard time for the decisions they made before the week starts off. But if you're playing a player that's already ruled out in your lineup, that's just being a clown. If you don't look at your lineup correctly and you move a player that's out to your flex spot, also you're kind of just foolish for doing that. But as always, Brian, cheers, and I hope you the best week of fantasy that you can have until I have to end up playing you again.
We're going 3-0 this week. That's what's going to happen. We have the worst bye weeks in all of fantasy football this week, but I'm hoping out for my free agents and my backup. So let's get it.
All right. See you guys later.